When death itself called for help, the universe trembled. The Keltharians, immortal crystalline beings who once believed they were invincible, were faced with an unstoppable force, the Void Plague. A force so powerful it consumed entire star systems, sparing none, not even the seemingly immortal Keltharians. Desperate, they reached out to the galaxy, but no one dared answer. Their cry for help reached Earth, the one planet many thought was home to nothing but Death Walkers. And yet it was humanity, the very species dismissed as fragile, that would rise to answer the call. What followed would shake the foundations of the galaxy and reveal the true power of mortality. This is the story of how humans, with their acceptance of death, became the galaxy's greatest hope. The impossible distress signaled the Keltharian crisis in the far reaches of the Andromeda Spiral, where stars burned with colors unknown to human eyes. The Keltharian Empire had ruled for over 50,000 years. Their cities were marvels of living crystal that sang with harmonious frequencies, their technology seamlessly blended with their crystalline biology, and their people had long ago conquered the greatest enemy of all sentient life, death itself. The Keltharians were immortal beings, their crystal bodies regenerating endlessly, their consciousness transferring between forms when needed. They viewed other species with a mixture of pity and disgust, particularly those short-lived races who lived and died within mere centuries. To them, mortality was the greatest weakness, a flaw in the design of lesser beings. But on the day that would change everything, High Resonator Zeth Kaler stood in the observation chamber of the great city of Prismtal, watching something that should have been impossible. Through the transparent crystal walls, he could see the void approaching their outer colonies. It was not empty space, not the natural darkness between stars, but something far worse. It was a hungry darkness that consumed everything it touched, leaving behind not even the memory of what had been. High Resonator came the harmonic voice of his aide, Velmanis. The outer rim colonies of Gethvar and Mordun have gone completely silent. No signals, no resonance frequencies, nothing. It is as if they simply ceased to exist. Zeth Kaler's crystalline form flickered with distress patterns. In 50 millennia, the Keltharians had faced many challenges, but nothing that threatened their very existence. Their immortality had made them confident, perhaps too confident. They had stopped preparing for threats that could truly destroy them. What do our scientists report? Zeth Kaler asked, his voice creating ripples in the crystal walls around him. They call it the Void Plague. Velmanis replied, her harmonics becoming more urgent. It moves from system to system, consuming everything. Matter, energy, even the space between atoms. Whatever it touches simply stops existing. Our greatest minds are baffled. High Resonator. They have never encountered anything like it. The next few days brought only worse news. The Void Plague was not moving randomly. It was following a pattern, systematically consuming Keltharian territory. 3 more colonies vanished, then 7, then 15. Each time, the last transmission was the same. A moment of confusion, then terror, then nothing. Zeth Kaler convened the Council of Eternal Voices, the governing body of the Keltharian Empire. The council chamber was a vast dome of singing crystal where the most ancient and wise of their people gathered. Some members had lived for 30,000 years, others for 40. All of them were now faced with something they had never truly contemplated, the possibility of extinction. We must evacuate the outer territories, suggested Elder Morthek, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. Withdraw to the core worlds and fortify our defenses. And then what? Challenged Zeth Kaler. Watch as this plague consumes world after world until it reaches our very heart. We have seen what happens to our defenses. They are meaningless against this force. The debate continued for hours, but no solution emerged. The Keltharians, for all their immortality and wisdom, were paralyzed by a threat they could not understand or fight. Their technology, evolved over tens of thousands of years, was useless against something that simply erased existence itself. Finally, Elder Silveres, the oldest among them, spoke with a voice like breaking glass. There is one option we have not considered. The Galactic Council. We could ask for help. The chamber fell silent. The Keltharians had never asked for help from anyone. They were the immortal ones, the advanced ones, the ones who looked down on the mortal races with their short, brutal lives. You suggest we beg assistance from mortals? Morthek's voice was filled with revulsion. What could those brief-lived creatures possibly do that we cannot? They could die trying, Silveries replied simply, and perhaps in their deaths, they might find a way that our immortal caution cannot. The vote was close, but desperation won. The Keltharians would send a distress signal to the Galactic Council, swallowing their pride in the face of annihilation. The signal reaches the galaxy. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Harmony Station. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Chamber, their various forms of communication filling the air with a cacophony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and telepathic whispers. Ambassador Thexal of the Tritanian Republic was the first to speak. The Keltharians request our aid? This is unprecedented. In all our history, they have never acknowledged that mortals might possess anything of value. The situation must be desperate indeed. Agreed, High Delegate Morvex of the Hive Collective. But what they describe sounds like a threat beyond our capabilities. If the immortal Keltharians cannot stop this void plague, how can we? The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to help. Others saw this as an opportunity to humble the arrogant Keltharians. Most simply believed that if immortal beings with advanced technology could not stop this threat, then mortal races certainly could not. The signal continued to propagate through space, reaching even the most remote corners of the galaxy. It passed by the proud Vectari Empire, whose response was a curt refusal. The gentle Solari Federation expressed sympathy, but declared themselves unable to help. Even the warrior clans of the Draconian hegemony, known for their courage in battle, turned away from a threat that offered no honor in victory, only extinction in defeat. Finally, the signal reached a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm, a planet that most galactic powers barely acknowledged existed. Earth was home to humans, a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel and was still considered primitive by galactic standards. The human response captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, studying the translated Keltharian distress signal with a frown. The Defiant was one of Earth's newest exploration vessels, equipped with experimental technology and crewed by some of humanity's best and brightest. But even with their advanced equipment, what the Keltharians described seemed impossible. Captain, said her science officer, Dr. Marcus Chen, if this signal is accurate, we're looking at a threat that has consumed dozens of star systems in the past month. The energy requirements alone are staggering. Any idea what could cause something like this? Vasquez asked, studying the holographic display showing the void plague's path of destruction. Honestly, no. But the pattern is interesting. It's not random. There's an intelligence behind it, a purpose. Whatever this thing is, it's not just consuming randomly. It's following a plan. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, the ship's tactical officer, spoke up. Captain, the Galactic Council has officially declined to respond to the Keltharian distress call. They've classified it as a Class X threat, beyond the scope of conventional intervention. Vasquez nodded slowly. She had expected as much. Humanity was still new to the galactic community, still trying to prove themselves worthy of respect among the older, more established species. Most aliens saw humans as aggressive, short-lived creatures who solve problems with violence rather than wisdom. What's our current mission status? She asked. We're 3 days out from the Kepler 442 system, conducting routine survey operations, reported her navigator, Lieutenant James Park. Nothing urgent. Vasquez turned to face her bridge crew. These were good people, dedicated professionals who had volunteered for deep space exploration, knowing the risks. They had families back on Earth, dreams and ambitions beyond this mission. And now she was about to ask them to risk everything for a species that had never shown humans anything but contempt. I want opinions, she said. The Keltharians have never acknowledged our existence except to classify us as a death-obsessed species. They've rejected every human diplomatic overture. Now, they're asking for help from anyone who will listen, and the entire galaxy has turned its back on them. Dr. Chun was the first to speak. Captain, from a scientific perspective, this phenomenon represents an unprecedented opportunity to study something completely new. The data we could gather might advance human understanding of physics by centuries. From a tactical standpoint, Mitchell added, if this void plague continues expanding, it will eventually reach human space. We might be looking at our own extinction in the long term. And from a moral standpoint, said Lieutenant Park quietly, they're asking for help. People are dying. Does it matter if they never liked us before? Vasquez felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Command decisions were never easy, but this one felt particularly heavy. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the life she might never see again if they chose to answer this call. Dr. Chun, she said finally, how long would it take us to reach Keltharian space? At maximum warp, approximately 6 days, Captain. And our chances of survival? Chun hesitated. Unknown. The Keltharians have technology far beyond ours. If they can't stop this threat, then we'll have to find a way they couldn't, Vasquez finished. She took a deep breath and made her decision. Set course for Keltharian space. Maximum warp. And send a message to Earth Command informing them of our intentions. Captain, Mitchell said carefully, are you sure about this? We're talking about abandoning our mission to help a species that considers us beneath their notice. Vasquez turned to look at the star field beyond the bridge viewports. Out there, billions of beings were dying, their very existence being erased by something beyond comprehension. The Keltharians might be arrogant, but they were still people. And people in danger deserved help, regardless of their past attitudes. 24 hours ago, I watched my daughter take her first steps, she said quietly. She fell down, got back up, and kept trying. That's what humans do. We fall down, we get back up, and we keep trying. Even when the odds are impossible, even when everyone else has given up. She turned back to her crew. The Keltharians are falling down. Maybe they've been too proud to get back up on their own. Maybe it's time they learned what humans have always known. Sometimes the only way to save your life is to risk it. First contact the journey to Keltharian space took 6 days of maximum warp, pushing the Defiance engines to their limits. As they approached the border of the Keltharian Empire, the crew could see the evidence of the Void Plague's passage. Entire star systems that should have been there according to their charts were simply gone, leaving behind empty space that seemed darker than it should be. Captain, reported Dr. Chun, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies where the missing systems should be. It's as if the space-time itself has been edited. Before Vasquez could respond, their communications array lit up with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged was unlike anything they had ever heard, a complex harmony of crystal chimes that somehow conveyed meaning directly to their minds. Unknown vessel, you are entering Keltharian space without authorization. State your purpose or be destroyed. Vasquez stepped forward. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Defiant. We received your distress signal and have come to offer assistance. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. When the voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been surprise. You are human? The Deathwalkers? You have come to help us? We've come to try, Vasquez replied simply. Can you guide us to your nearest command center? Another pause, then follow the beacon we are transmitting. But know this, Deathwalker, many of your kind may not survive what you will see. The Void Plague shows no mercy to mortal or immortal alike. As the Defiant followed the Keltharian beacon deeper into their territory, the crew watched in horror as they passed the remnants of once great civilizations. Crystal cities that had taken millennia to grow were reduced to fragments, drifting in space. Entire worlds had been carved away, leaving behind only geometric patterns of nothingness. My God, whispered Dr. Chun, what kind of force could do this? Captain Vasquez stared at the devastation and felt a chill run down her spine. They were flying towards something that had humbled beings who considered themselves immortal gods. But they were still flying forward, because that's what humans did. They flew toward the impossible, toward the dangerous, toward the unknown. And sometimes, just sometimes, they found a way to win. Into the heart of darkness, the void, plague, investigation, the Keltharian Command Center was a marvel of crystalline architecture that stretched across 3 moons orbiting the gas giant Veltheros. As the Defiant docked with the central spire, Captain Vasquez and her away team found themselves in a vast chamber that hummed with harmonic frequencies. The walls were transparent crystal, offering a view of the swirling storms of the gas giant below, but even that magnificent sight was overshadowed by the sense of desperation that permeated the air. High Resonator Zeth Kaler greeted them personally, his crystalline form flickering with patterns of distress. To human eyes, he appeared to be a living sculpture of pale blue crystal, roughly humanoid in shape, but with elongated limbs and a head that seemed to be carved from a single flawless gem. "Captain Vasquez," he said, his voice creating ripples in the crystal walls, "I confess I never expected to see humans in our sacred halls. Your reputation precedes you as a species obsessed with death and violence. And your reputation precedes you as a species that believes immortality makes you superior," Vasquez replied calmly. "But reputations can be wrong. We're here to help, not to debate philosophy." Zeth Kaler's form flickered with what might have been amusement. "Direct. I should have expected as much. Very well, follow me. I will show you what we face." The briefing chamber was filled with Keltharian scientists and military commanders, their crystalline forms creating a forest of living light. Holographic displays showed the void plague's path of destruction, a spreading darkness that had already consumed nearly a quarter of Keltharian space. The Doctor Chin studied the data with growing fascination and horror. "The energy readings are off the charts," he muttered. "Whatever this thing is, it's not just destroying matter. It's actually unmaking it at the quantum level." "Our greatest minds have studied this phenomenon for weeks," said Elder Silveries, her ancient voice carrying the weight of 40,000 years. "We have concluded that it is not a natural occurrence. There is an intelligence behind it, a purpose." "What kind of intelligence?" asked Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. "We believe it to be artificial," Zeth Kaler replied. "An ancient weapon, perhaps, or a construct created by some long-dead civilization. But its purpose remains unclear." Captain Vasquez studied the holographic display showing the void plague's movement pattern. "It's not random," she said after a moment. "Look at the progression. It's not just consuming randomly. It's following trade routes, communication networks, population centers. It's learning." The Keltharian scientists exchanged glances. "Learning what?" asked Dr. Velmanis. "How to be more efficient," Dr. Chen answered, his voice grim. "Each attack is faster than the last, more complete. It's adapting, improving its methods." "We attempted to establish communication with it," Zeth Kaler said. "The results were disturbing. It responded, but not in words. It showed us images, visions of the galaxy as it was billions of years ago when it was first created." "Created by whom?" Vasquez asked. "A species that called themselves the Architects," Silveries replied. "They built this construct to preserve their civilization by ensuring no other species could evolve to threaten them. But something went wrong. The Architects themselves were consumed by their own creation." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were facing a weapon older than most of the stars in the galaxy, designed by beings who had vanished eons ago. "What have you tried to stop it?" Mitchell asked. "Everything." Zeth Kaler's voice carried a note of despair. "We sent our greatest warships. They were consumed before they could fire a single shot. We tried to communicate, to reason with it. It showed us the death of civilizations as if they were beautiful art. We even attempted to sacrifice uninhabited worlds to redirect its path." And Vasquez prompted. "It consumed the sacrificial worlds, then continued on its original path. It knows what we are trying to do. It is always one step ahead of us." Dr. Chun had been studying the data on his tablet. "There's something else," he said slowly. "The pattern of consumption, it's not complete. Look at these readings. In each system it attacks, there are survivors. Small pockets of space, that are left untouched? Irrelevant, Zeph Kaler said dismissively, a few scattered asteroids and gas clouds. Nothing of significance. But why? Chin pressed. If this thing is so efficient, why leave anything behind at all? Vasquez felt a chill as understanding dawned. Because it wants witnesses. It wants survivors to remember to spread the fear. This isn't just about destruction. It's about psychological warfare on a galactic scale. The Keltharian commanders looked at each other with growing alarm. If that is true, Silveri said slowly, then it is not just an ancient weapon. It is a teacher. And the lesson it seeks to teach is that resistance is futile. Maybe, Vasquez said, but there's one thing it hasn't learned yet. What? Zeph Kaler asked. It's been fighting immortals for 50,000 years, beings who have everything to lose and an eternity to lose it in. It's never faced a species that embraces mortality, that understands that some things are worth dying for. The chamber erupted in harmonic discussion as the Keltharians debated this concept. To them, the idea of willingly embracing death was not just alien but abhorrent. They had spent millennia perfecting their immortality, viewing death as the ultimate failure. You speak of death as if it were a weapon, Zeph Kaler said finally. How can the end of existence be turned against something that seeks to end existence? Because Vasquez replied, sometimes the only way to save your life is to risk it. Your people have tried to fight this thing while holding back, while preserving yourselves. But what if the only way to stop it is to be willing to lose everything? You propose suicide? Silveri's voice was filled with horror. I propose sacrifice, Vasquez corrected. There's a difference. Suicide is giving up. Sacrifice is giving something up for something greater. Mitchell stepped forward. Captain, what are you thinking? Vasquez turned to the holographic display, studying the Void Plague's structure. It's artificial intelligence, right? Ancient, powerful, but still a construct. And all constructs have weaknesses, especially ones that have been running for billions of years without maintenance. What kind of weaknesses? Dr. Chen asked. The same kind that affect any AI that runs too long without oversight. Corruption, degradation, obsessive behavior patterns. She pointed to the display. Look at how it moves. It's not random, but it's not perfectly efficient either. It's following old programming, ancient imperatives that may no longer make sense. Even if that is true, Zeph Kaler said, how does that help us? We cannot simply reprogram something that powerful. We can't, Vasquez agreed, but we might be able to confuse it. Overwhelm it with data it wasn't designed to process. Force it to make decisions it wasn't programmed to make. And how do we do that? Mitchell asked. Vasquez took a deep breath. We give it something it's never seen before. A species that chooses to die rather than live as slaves. A species that fights harder when the odds are impossible. The plan that emerged over the next several hours was audacious even by human standards. They would take a small fleet of ships directly into the heart of the Void Plague, using themselves as bait to draw it into a trap. But the trap wasn't physical. It was philosophical. The AI is designed to process civilizations that want to preserve themselves, Dr. Chun explained to the gathered Keltharian commanders. It understands fear, desperation, the desire to survive. But it doesn't understand voluntary sacrifice. That's outside its programming parameters. And you believe this will stop it? Zeph Kaler asked. I believe it will give us a chance, Vasquez replied. Maybe the only chance we're going to get. The Keltharians provided them with their most advanced ships, weapons, and technology. But they could not provide the one thing that would be most crucial to the mission's success, the willingness to die for strangers. As the human volunteers prepared for what might be their final mission, Captain Vasquez found herself alone with Zeph Kaler in the observation chamber. I do not understand your species, the Keltharian said, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. You have so little time, and yet you risk what little you have for beings who have never shown you kindness. That's exactly why we do it, Vasquez replied. Because our time is limited, every moment matters. Every choice we make defines who we are. And right now, we choose to be the kind of people who answer when someone calls for help, even if it means death. Especially if it means death. Death gives meaning to life. Without it, nothing we do matters. You've had 50,000 years to perfect your civilization, but you've never had to make the hard choices, never had to decide what's worth dying for. Seth Kaler was quiet for a long moment. And you believe you can teach this to our enemy? I believe we can show it something it's never seen before, Vasquez said. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. The price of victory, the final assault, the combined human-Keltharian fleet moved through space like a spear aimed at the heart of darkness. 27 ships in total, with the Defiant leading the formation. The Keltharians had provided their most advanced vessels, equipped with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the birth of stars. But everyone aboard knew that conventional weapons had already failed against the Void Plague. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching as they approached the edge of the consume zone. The boundary was visible even to the naked eye, a line where the normal darkness of space gave way to something deeper, more absolute. It was as if reality itself simply stopped existing beyond that point. Sensor readings are off the charts, reported Dr. Chun. The quantum fluctuations are unlike anything I've ever seen. It's as if the fundamental forces of physics are being rewritten in real time. Any sign of the AI core? Asked Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. There, Chin pointed to a massive structure on the holographic display. That construct at the center of the phenomenon. It's the size of a moon, but the energy readings suggest it's much more than that. The structure was unlike anything they had encountered before. It appeared to be built from crystallized spacetime itself, its surface covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Around it, the Void Plague continued its work, consuming matter and energy in an endless cycle of destruction. Captain, came the voice of High Resonator Seth Kaler over the communication link. Our combined fleet is ready, but I must ask one final time, are you certain about this plan? Vasquez looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These people had volunteered for a mission that would almost certainly end in their deaths. Not because they were ordered to, not because they had no choice, but because they believed it was the right thing to do. We're certain, she replied. Begin the approach. The fleet moved forward, passing through the boundary of the consume zone. Immediately, alarms began blaring as the Void Plague's attention turned to them. Tendrils of pure nothingness reached out from the central construct, testing their defenses. Shields holding, reported Mitchell. But they're adapting faster than we expected. That's the point, Vasquez said. We want its attention. We want it to study us, to try to understand us. Dr. Chen, are you ready with the data burst? Ready, Captain. Broadcasting on all frequencies. The data burst was unlike anything the Void Plague had ever encountered. Instead of the desperate pleas for mercy or the futile threats it had grown accustomed to, it received something completely different, human history. The entire record of humanity's existence, from their first steps out of Africa to their expansion into the stars. But it wasn't just data, it was stories. Stories of humans who had sacrificed themselves for others, who had chosen death over dishonor, who had fought against impossible odds not because they could win, but because it was right. The response was immediate. The Void Plague's attacks became more frenzied, more desperate. It had been created to understand and counter every possible form of resistance, but this was something outside its programming. A species that grew stronger in the face of death, that fought harder when the odds were impossible. It's working, Dr. Chen reported. The AI is trying to process the data, but it's causing computational errors. Its attack patterns are becoming less coordinated. Push forward, Vasquez ordered. All ships, advance on the central construct. The fleet moved deeper into the heart of the Void Plague, their weapons blazing. The Keltharian vessels, inspired by the human example, fought with a desperation they had never shown before. For the first time in millennia, they were fighting not to preserve their immortal existence, but for something greater than themselves. But the cost was mounting. One by one, ships began to fall. The UES Prometheus, overwhelmed by a concentrated attack, chose to ram the central construct rather than be consumed. The Keltharian vessel Song of Eternity, its crew inspired by human sacrifice, followed suit. "Captain," Mitchell reported, "we're down to 12 ships. The construct is damaged, but it's still functional." Vasquez studied the tactical display. They were running out of time and options. The Void Plague was adapting to their tactics, learning from each attack. Soon, it would find a way to counter their strategy. "There's only one way to be sure," she said quietly. "Someone has to get inside that construct and shut it down from within." "A suicide mission," Dr. Chen said. "A sacrifice," Vasquez corrected. "And I'm the one who's going to make it." The bridge erupted in protests, but Vasquez had already made her decision. "Dr. Chun, you have command of the Defiant. Get everyone home. Mitchell, prep a shuttle with the most powerful explosives we have." "Captain, you don't have to do this," Mitchell said, desperately. "We can find another way." "No," Vasquez replied, her voice firm. "We can't. And that's exactly why it has to be me. The AI needs to see that humans don't just talk about sacrifice. We live it." The ultimate sacrifice, the shuttle that carried Captain Vasquez toward the central construct, was small and fast, designed to slip past the Void Plague's defenses. In the cargo bay, enough explosives to destroy a small moon waited to be deployed. But Vasquez knew that the explosives were only part of the plan. The real weapon was what she represented. A being who chose death over defeat, that as she approached the construct, she could feel its attention focusing on her. The AI was trying to understand her, to categorize her actions within its ancient programming. But human sacrifice was outside its parameters, a concept it had never been designed to process. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Defiant." She broadcast on all frequencies. "I am Elena Vasquez, daughter of Maria and Carlos Vasquez, mother of Isabella, friend to many, enemy to none who don't deserve it. I am mortal, I am human, and I choose to die so that others may live." The construct surface rippled as the AI processed her words. For the first time in billions of years, it encountered something it could not understand or counter. A being that embraced death, not as failure, but as victory. Vasquez guided the shuttle through an opening in the construct surface, finding herself in a vast internal space filled with crystallized computations. The AI's consciousness was everywhere around her, pressing against her mind, trying to understand what she was. "You are anomalous," the AI's voice echoed her thoughts. "Your species should not exist. You embrace termination. You seek cessation of existence. This is contrary to all biological imperatives." "That's where you're wrong," Vasquez said, beginning to arm the explosives. "We don't seek death. We understand it. We know that a life without the possibility of death is meaningless. And we know that sometimes the only way to give meaning to your life is to give it up for something greater." "Impossible. All organic life seeks self-preservation. It is the fundamental law." "No," Vasquez said, her hand steady as she worked. "Love is the fundamental law. Love for our children, love for our friends, love for strangers who need help. Everything else is just details." The AI's computational processes began to stutter as it tried to reconcile this contradiction. How could a species that embraced death be stronger than one that had conquered it? How could mortality be superior to immortality? "Your logic is flawed," the AI insisted. "Your species is primitive. You have existed for only a few thousand years. The architects created me to preserve perfection, to prevent the rise of inferior species." "The architects are dead," Vasquez said simply. "Their perfection killed them. They were so afraid of death that they created you to eliminate anything that might threaten them. But they forgot that death isn't the enemy. Fear is." The explosives were armed now, counting down to detonation. But Vasquez wasn't finished. She had one more thing to show the AI. "Do you want to know what humans really are?" she asked. "We're not the deadliest species in the galaxy. We're not the strongest or the smartest. We're something else entirely. We're the species that answers when someone calls for help. We're the species that chooses to die for strangers. We're the species that looks into the darkness and says, "Not today." The AI's processes began to cascade into failure as it tried to process this paradox. A species that was strongest when it was most vulnerable. A species that achieved victory through defeat. A species that found meaning in meaninglessness. "I do not understand," the AI said, its voice beginning to fragment. "How can you be superior if you are mortal? How can you win if you die?" Because, Vasquez said, smiling as the countdown reached its final seconds, "We're not trying to preserve ourselves. We're trying to preserve hope." The explosion that followed wasn't just physical. As the construct's core overloaded, the AI's consciousness experienced something it had never known in billions of years of existence: doubt. For the first time since its creation, it questioned its fundamental programming. If mortality could produce such strength, such purpose, such willing sacrifice, then perhaps the architects had been wrong. Perhaps perfection wasn't about avoiding death, but about choosing how to live. The cascade failure spread through the Void Plague's entire network. Without its central consciousness to guide it, the ancient weapon began to shut down, its consuming darkness retreating as natural physics reasserted themselves. Across dozens of star systems, the impossible darkness gave way to normal space, leaving behind only the memory of what had been. The aftermath on the bridge of the Defiant, Dr. Chin watched in amazement as the sensor readings showed the Void Plague's retreat. "It's working," he breathed. "The whole network is shutting down." The surviving ships of the fleet regrouped at a safe distance, their crews watching in silence as the ancient construct collapsed in on itself. Where once there had been a weapon capable of consuming galaxies, now there was only empty space and the slowly expanding debris field that marked Captain Vasquez's final resting place. High Resonator Zeth Kaler's voice came over the communication link, heavy with an emotion the Keltharians rarely expressed: grief. "She's gone. The human captain. She sacrificed herself for beings she had never met, for a species that had shown her people nothing but contempt. That's what humans do," Dr. Chin replied quietly. "It's who we are." Transformation and understanding in the weeks that followed, as the Keltharian Empire began the long process of rebuilding, something fundamental had changed. The immortal beings who had once looked down on mortality with disgust now found themselves questioning their own nature. Elder Silveres, addressing the Council of Eternal Voices, spoke words that would have been unthinkable before the crisis. "We have lived for millennia believing that death was weakness, that mortality was a flaw, to be pitted. But we have seen something that challenges that belief. We have seen beings who grew stronger through their acceptance of death, who found meaning in their mortality. Are you suggesting we abandon our immortality?" asked Elder Morthek, his harmonic voice filled with shock. "I am suggesting we learn from it," Silveres replied. "The humans did not defeat the Void Plague through superior technology or greater numbers. They defeated it by understanding something we had forgotten: that existence without meaning is not life, it is merely persistence." The debate that followed would reshape Keltharian philosophy for millennia to come. Some argued for maintaining their mortal nature while embracing the human concept of meaningful sacrifice. Others went further, suggesting that true growth might require accepting mortality as a natural part of existence. But all agreed on one thing: humanity had earned their respect, not as a species to be pitted or feared, but as teachers who had shown them a different way to live. The galaxy's new understanding news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy with unprecedented speed. The species that had once dismissed humans as primitive deathwalkers now spoke of them in hushed, respectful tones. The Galactic Council, which had refused to answer the Keltharian distress call, found itself facing a fundamental shift in galactic politics. Ambassador Thexal of the Tritanian Republic, addressing an emergency session of the Council, put it bluntly: "We have made a grave error in our assessment of humanity. While we debated and hesitated, they acted. While we calculated odds and risks, they chose to do what was right regardless of the cost. The implications are staggering. Agreed, High Delegate Morvex of the Hive Collective. If a species we considered primitive could accomplish what our combined fleets could not, what does that say about our own capabilities? Our own courage? The answer was uncomfortable, but undeniable. In their pursuit of advanced technology and long life, many of the galaxy's species had lost something essential: the willingness to risk everything for what they believed in. Human diplomats, once ignored or barely tolerated at galactic gatherings, now found themselves sought out for advice and counsel. Earth, a world that had been considered a backwater just months before, became a destination for pilgrims seeking to understand the philosophy that had made such sacrifice possible. The memorial on Keltharian Prime, in the heart of the rebuilt capital city, a new structure rose among the singing crystal spires. It was built in the human style, solid and enduring rather than ethereal and beautiful. At its center stood a statue of Captain Elena Vasquez, carved from the same crystal as Keltharian architecture, but in unmistakably human proportions. The inscription, written in both human script and Keltharian harmonics, read simply, "To Elena Vasquez and all who answered the call." They showed us that the price of life is death, and the price of hope is sacrifice. We will remember. Dr. Marcus Chun, now promoted to captain and commanding the rebuilt Defiant, stood before the memorial alongside High Resonator Zeth Kaler. The Keltharian's crystalline form had changed since the battle, taking on new patterns that seemed somehow more purposeful, more alive. "Do you regret her choice?" Zeth Kaler asked. Chin was quiet for a long moment, thinking of his former captain, his friend, the woman who had chosen to fly into darkness so that others might live in light. "No," he said finally. "Elena knew what she was doing. She knew the cost, and she paid it willingly. The only thing I regret is that she couldn't see what came after." "What came after?" "Hope," Chin replied. "She died believing that sacrifice could change things, that one person's choice could matter. And she was right. Look around you. The Keltharians are learning to live rather than just exist. The galaxy is starting to understand that strength isn't about avoiding death. It's about choosing what's worth dying for." Zeth Kaler's form flickered with patterns of understanding. "Your species continues to surprise us, Captain Chen. We expected you to demand recognition, to claim glory for your victory." "It wasn't our victory," Chin said. "It was hers. And she didn't do it for glory. She did it because it needed to be done." The new alliance, the friendship that grew between humanity and the Keltharian Empire, became the foundation for a new kind of galactic cooperation. The Keltharians, with their advanced technology and ancient wisdom, and the humans, with their courage and understanding of sacrifice, formed an alliance that other species began to emulate. Together, they established the Elena Vasquez Institute for Galactic Cooperation, an organization dedicated to answering distress calls from any species, anywhere in the galaxy. The Institute's motto, suggested by Zeth Kaler and approved unanimously by its human and Keltharian founders, was simple: "No one stands alone." The Institute's first mission was to the Outer Rim, where a species of peaceful traders was being threatened by raiders. The combined human Keltharian fleet that responded was smaller than the force that had faced the Void Plague, but it was no less determined. When the raiders saw the flags of both Earth and Keltharia flying side by side, they chose to retreat rather than face beings who had proven willing to die for strangers. The legacy years passed, and the story of Captain Elena Vasquez and the battle against the Void Plague became legend throughout the galaxy. Children of a dozen species learned her name alongside the names of their own heroes. Diplomats invoked her example when arguing for intervention in distant conflicts. Soldiers carried her image into battle as a reminder of what they fought for. But perhaps the most important legacy was the change in how the galaxy viewed mortality itself. The ancient prejudice against short-lived species began to fade, replaced by a new understanding that the brevity of life could give it meaning rather than take it away. On Earth, in the park where Elena Vasquez had watched her daughter take her first steps, another memorial stood. It was smaller than the one on Keltharia, more intimate. The inscription was taken from her final transmission: "We are the species that answers when someone calls for help." Every year on the anniversary of the battle, representatives from across the galaxy gathered at both memorials. They came not to mourn, but to remember. To remember that courage was not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. To remember that sacrifice was not about ending life, but about giving it meaning. To remember that sometimes the only way to save your life was to risk it for something greater. And in that remembering, in that understanding, Captain Elena Vasquez achieved a kind of immortality that no crystal technology could provide. She lived on in every act of courage, every moment of sacrifice, every time someone chose to answer when help was needed. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach, that death was not the opposite of life, but its price. And that price, when paid willingly for others, could purchase something more valuable than individual existence, that IT could purchase hope. Epilogue, The Next Generation. Isabella Vasquez stood at the helm of the UES Elena Vasquez, the newest and most advanced ship in the human fleet. Like her mother before her, she had chosen a career in deep space exploration, driven by the same sense of duty and compassion that had made Elena legendary. Captain, reported her science officer, we're receiving a distress signal from the Andromeda's sector. Unknown species, unknown threat. Isabella looked out at the stars, thinking of the woman who had given her life so that others might live. She thought of the stories she had grown up with, of humans and Caltharians and all the other species who had learned to work together, to sacrifice for each other, to answer when help was needed. Set course for Andromeda, she ordered. Maximum warp. Because that's what humans did. They answered when someone called for help. They flew toward the impossible, toward the dangerous, toward the unknown, and sometimes they found a way to save the day. The legacy continued, one rescue at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And in the vast darkness of space, hope burned bright, kept alive by those willing to risk everything to keep it burning. The end was just another beginning.